My name is Clara, and until a few months ago, I was the queen of the ordinary. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a decent-sized apartment in the heart of Seattle. I work as a freelance manuscript editor. My entire life revolves around fixing things. I spend 8 hours a day staring at a screen, hunting for misplaced commas, fixing broken sentences, and making sure other people's stories make sense. I've always had this obsession with order. I like it when things fit. I like it when there's a logical explanation for everything. Maybe that's why I was so good at ignoring the quiet, hollow ache that had been sitting in the middle of my chest for as long as I could remember. It was this weird, unnameable feeling, like I was a guest in my own skin. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you were there? My whole life felt like that. I had parents who loved me, Martha and Richard. They were the kind of parents people envied. They called me every single day. Martha would worry if I'd eaten enough vegetables or if I was getting enough sleep. Richard would remind me to check the tire pressure on my car every time it rained. They protected me like I was made of thin glass. Growing up, I never questioned it. I just thought they were extra careful because I was an only child. I had the photo albums to prove our happy life. Well, most of it. There were plenty of pictures of me from age 8 onwards. Trips to the Oregon coast, birthday parties with chocolate cake smeared on my face, high school graduation. But there was always a gap. A blank space where my earliest memories should have been. Martha told me that when I was 5, a massive electrical fire destroyed our old apartment. We lost everything, clothes, furniture, and every single baby photo. It was a tragedy, she said. A clean slate. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. She was the one who tucked me in and sang to me. But even with all that love, I felt untethered. Like a book that started on chapter 10. I just didn't know that the first 9 chapters had been violently ripped out by the people I trusted most. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon. I was feeling miserable, coming down with a nasty flu that made my head feel like it was filled with wet sand. I dragged myself out of bed and walked through the drizzling Seattle rain to the neighborhood pharmacy. The place smelled like industrial cleaner and cheap plastic. I was standing in line, clutching a pack of flu medicine and a bottle of orange juice, just wanting to go home and disappear under my duvet. The woman behind me in line changed my life with 5 words. I didn't even notice her at first. I was busy checking an email on my phone when I felt a pair of eyes burning into the back of my neck. It was that prickling sensation you get when someone is staring too hard. I turned around, expecting to see someone impatient for the line to move. Instead, I saw a woman in her late 30s, wearing a beige trench coat. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Her face was deathly pale, and her hands were trembling so hard her car keys were jingling. She didn't say excuse me. She didn't ask for the time. She stepped closer, invading my personal space, and whispered, "You have my sister's eyes." I froze. My first thought was that she was a bit unstable. Seattle has its fair share of eccentric characters, after all. I gave her a tight, polite smile, the kind you give when you're trying to escape a weird conversation. I said something like, "Oh, really? That's nice," and turned back around. But then, she reached out and grabbed my forearm. Her grip was tight, cold, and desperate. "Wait," she gasped. Her voice was thick with tears. "Please. My sister, she disappeared in 1999. She was 7 years old. We never stopped looking." Then, she whispered a name. "Stella?" The name didn't just ring a bell, it felt like a physical blow to my stomach. It was a sound I hadn't heard in decades, yet every cell in my body seemed to vibrate in response. A memory flashed in my mind, not a clear picture, but a feeling. The smell of cut grass and the sound of a screen door slamming. I panicked. The orderly world I had built for myself started to tilt on its axis. I shoved my money onto the counter, grabbed my bag, and literally ran out of the pharmacy. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to be Clara again. But as I ran through the rain, I knew that Clara was a lie. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up in my bathroom, sitting on the cold tile floor, staring at my reflection in the mirror until my eyes ached. I leaned in close, pulling my hair back from my forehead. There it was. A thin, jagged scar right at my hairline. Martha always told me I'd fallen off a swing set when I was 4. She told the story so often I could recite it by heart. She'd talk about how much I cried and how Richard had carried me 3 blocks to the urgent care clinic. But as I sat there, I realized I couldn't feel it. I didn't have a single sensory memory of that day. No memory of the swing, the fall, or the hospital. Every memory I had was a story told to me, not a memory lived by me. It was like my entire childhood was a screenplay written by someone else, and I was just the actress hired to play the lead role. I went to my closet and pulled out the old wooden box where I kept my past. I dumped the photos onto the floor. I looked at them with new eyes. Why were there no photos of me before the age of 8? The house fire story felt so flimsy now. People save things. Relatives have copies. I realized I had no birth certificate in this box. No social security card from my childhood. Just a replacement certificate issued when I was 10. I started shaking. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I realized that if that woman was right, the people sleeping in their nice house in Bellevue weren't my parents. They were my captors. I had to know. I drove to Bellevue on Sunday for our routine family dinner. The house was perfect, as always. Martha was in the kitchen, humming a song while she basted a roast chicken. Richard was in the living room, reading the Sunday paper. They greeted me with the same suffocating affection they always did. Martha kissed my cheek and told me I looked like I was working too hard. During dinner, I decided to set a trap. I kept my voice casual, sipping on my wine as I looked at a vase of flowers on the table. "Hey, Mom," I said. "I had the weirdest dream last night. I remembered that time I broke my arm when I was 3. You remember that? The blue cast?" I watched them closely. This was a total lie. I'd never broken my arm. If they were my real parents, they would have looked confused. They would have laughed and said, "Clara, what are you talking about? You never broke your arm." Instead, Martha didn't even blink. She smiled that sweet, maternal smile and nodded. "Oh, I remember that so well, honey. You were such a brave little girl. You insisted on the blue cast because it was your favorite color." Richard chimed in without missing a beat. "Yeah, I had to carry you everywhere for 6 weeks. You were a handful." The air left my lungs. My vision blurred. They were lying. They were lying so smoothly, so effortlessly, that it was clear they'd been doing it for 27 years. They weren't just misremembering, they were actively maintaining a fiction. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to excuse myself. I locked myself in their guest bathroom and gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't their daughter. I was a project. I was a stolen life they'd decided to keep. I left dinner early, claiming I had a massive headache. I didn't go home. I drove to my best friend Gwen's place. Gwen is a nurse, practical, sharp, and the only person I knew who wouldn't think I was having a mental breakdown. I sat on her sofa and told her everything. I told her about the pharmacy, the woman, the scar, and the broken arm test. Gwen sat in silence for a long time, her face grave. She didn't try to rationalize it away. She didn't tell me I was being dramatic. She just grabbed her laptop and sat down next to me. "If this is true, Clara," she said quietly, "then there's a paper trail. 1999 isn't that long ago. Kidnappings make the news." We spent the next 6 hours hunched over her laptop. We searched for every missing child case in Washington state from that year. It was frustrating. A lot of the old records weren't fully digitized. We found hundreds of cases of runaways and parental disputes. But then, Gwen found a link to a cold case forum. There was a post from 2 years ago. A woman looking for her sister, Stella. The description of the disappearance was chilling: a 7-year-old girl taken from her front yard in a quiet suburb while her mother was inside for just 2 minutes. There was a composite sketch of what the girl might look like as an adult. Gwen turned the laptop toward me. My own face stared back at me. It wasn't a perfect match, but the eyes, the shape, the slight droop of the left eyelid, the intense amber color, were unmistakable. "We need to go to the library tomorrow," Gwen said, her voice firm. "We need the actual newspapers from that week. We need the details the internet doesn't have." I nodded, feeling a cold, hard resolve settling in my chest. Clara was dying, and Stella was starting to wake up. If you're finding Clara's journey as heart-wrenching as I am, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Thank you so much. The Seattle Central Library felt like a tomb. It was Monday morning, and the basement where they kept the microfilm archives was nearly empty. The air was stale and smelled like old paper and electricity. Gwen and I sat at one of the viewing machines. My hands were shaking so much I couldn't even load the film. Gwen took over, her movements calm and methodical. We scrolled through weeks of news from June 1999. It was a blur of old advertisements, political scandals, and weather reports. And then, there it was. A headline that made my heart stop: 7-year-old Stella still missing, police suspect abduction. There was a photo of the little girl. She was wearing a yellow sundress and had 2 pigtails. She was missing her front 2 teeth. But even through the grainy black and white scan, I recognized her. I recognized the way she tilted her head. I recognized the sweater she was wearing in the photo, a handmade knit with little ducks on it. I had a sudden, violent memory of the wool being itchy against my neck. I gasped, clutching the edge of the table. "That's me," I whispered. "Gwen, that's me." The article mentioned her family. Her mother's name was Monica. Her older sister was Valerie. The disappearance had happened in a small town just 40 miles from where I grew up. My parents, Martha and Richard, had lived in that same town back then. They'd moved to Seattle only a year after the kidnapping. Everything was falling into place, and it was a nightmare. I needed one more piece of evidence. Something physical. I knew Martha and Richard were going to a community theater show that evening. I waited until I saw their car pull out of the driveway in Bellevue, and then I used my spare key. Walking into that house felt like trespassing on a crime scene. I went straight to the attic. There was a locked metal box that Martha had always told me contained private legal documents and that I was never to touch it. I didn't care about rules anymore. I found a heavy screwdriver in the garage and pried the lock open. My heart was thundering in my ears. Inside, I found a manila folder. There was a birth certificate for Clara. I held it up to the light. I'm an editor, I noticed details. The font on the date of birth was slightly different from the rest of the document. It was a high-quality forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. But the real kicker was a small, leather-bound journal. It was Martha's. I flicked through the pages until I reached 1999. The entries were frantic at first, talking about her 3rd failed IVF treatment and her shattering grief. Then, in July, the entries changed. "He brought her home today," Martha had written. "She's perfect." She cried for a while, but I told her I'm her mother now. "Richard says the man we paid took care of everything. We have a daughter. Finally, we are a real family. We will call her Clara. We will protect her from the world." I dropped the journal like it was made of hot coal. They hadn't just found me. They had commissioned me. They had paid someone to snatch a child from a yard to fill the hole in their own lives. They weren't just liars, they were monsters who had built a life on the ruins of another family's soul. I sat in my car in the dark for an hour, clutching the forged birth certificate and the journal. I felt like I was disappearing. If I wasn't Clara, who was I? I was a ghost. I was a stolen object. I took out my phone and searched for Valerie again. Now that I had her full name from the newspaper article, it was easy. She lived in Tacoma. She was a florist. I found a business number. I stared at the call button for a long time. My finger hovered over the screen. If I pressed this, there was no going back. Clara would be gone forever. Martha and Richard would probably go to prison. My entire world would burn down. I pressed it. The phone rang 3 times. A woman's voice answered. It was the same voice from the pharmacy, but calmer. Valerie's Flowers, how can I help you? I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. I just breathed into the phone. Hello? Valerie asked. Is someone there? It's the girl from the pharmacy, I managed to choke out. The one you called Stella. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I could hear Valerie's breath hitch. I have the locket, she whispered. I have the other half. Please. Please tell me where you are. We met at a small, quiet cafe halfway between Seattle and Tacoma. I chose a place with a lot of windows, somewhere I could see the exits. I was terrified. Not of Valerie, but of the truth she carried. She was already there when I walked in. She was sitting in a corner booth, a cardboard box on the table in front of her. When she saw me, she didn't jump up and scream. She just looked at me with those same amber eyes, and I saw a lifetime of grief wash over her face. I sat down across from her. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Valerie reached into the box and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. It was shaped like a heart, but it was broken down the middle. Our grandmother gave this to us, Valerie said, her voice trembling. I have the right side. Stella had the left. She was wearing it the day she went missing. I reached into my bag. I'd found the small silver heart at the bottom of the attic box, buried under some old baby clothes. I'd always been told it was a family heirloom from Martha's side. I placed it on the table. Valerie's hand shook as she picked up my piece and held it next to hers. They clicked together. The jagged edges fit perfectly. The engraving on the back, when joined, read, "Always together." I felt a sob build up in my chest. This wasn't a story anymore. It wasn't a theory. It was an undeniable, physical fact. I was the girl from the yellow sundress. I was the sister who was lost. Valerie had brought a DNA kit with her. A commercial one, the kind you can do at home and mail to a lab. She didn't pressure me. She just put it on the table. I know this is a lot, she said softly. And I know you have a life. But my mother, she's still alive, Stella. She's in a nursing home now. She has dementia, but every single day, she asks if the police called. Every single day, she waits by the door. We need to know for sure. For her. I took the swab. I rubbed it against the inside of my cheek, feeling like I was signing a death warrant for the only parents I'd ever known. We packed it up and went to the post office together to mail it. The next 14 days were the longest of my life. I couldn't work. I couldn't eat. I stopped answering Martha's calls. She left me dozens of voicemails, her voice getting more and more frantic. Clara, honey, are you okay? Why aren't you picking up? Did we do something wrong? I listened to them and felt nothing but a cold, hard anger. How could she sound so motherly? How could she pretend to care about my well-being when she had stolen me from a mother who was now rotting away in a nursing home, still waiting for a daughter who would never come home? I lived in a state of suspension, hovering between 2 identities, waiting for a lab in California to tell me who I was. The email came on a Monday morning. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a manuscript I hadn't touched in weeks. The subject line was simple: your DNA results are ready. I clicked the link. My heart was beating so loud I thought my neighbors could hear it. I scrolled past the introductory text, past the pie charts about my ancestry, down to the relational matches. At the very top of the list was a name, Valerie Miller. The relationship, full sibling. The confidence, 99.99%. I sat there for a long time, just staring at that number. 99.99%. It was the most certain thing I'd ever known in my entire life. Clara Montgomery was a ghost. She was a fiction created by two desperate people in a house in Bellevue. I was Stella Miller. I was a person who had been mourned for 27 years. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, icy calm come over me. I picked up my car keys and the manila folder from the attic. I had one more fixing job to do. I was going to edit the final chapter of Martha and Richard's lie. I didn't call ahead. I just drove to Bellevue and walked into the house. They were in the living room, watching a sitcom on TV. They looked so normal. So innocent. Clara. Martha cried, jumping up. Oh, thank God. We've been so worried. Where have you been? She moved to hug me, but I stepped back. I felt a visceral revulsion at her touch. I walked over to the coffee table and dropped the DNA results and Martha's journal onto the glass surface. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Richard stood up, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. He looked at the journal, then at me. He knew. He'd always known this day might come. Martha picked up the paper, her eyes scanning the results. She started to shake. Honey, I can explain, we did it for you, we gave you everything, you didn't do it for me, I said, my voice as cold as a mountain stream. You did it for yourselves. You stole me. You paid someone to take a 7-year-old girl from her yard. You watched my real mother's life break on the news and you just went on with your lives? You fed me, you clothed me, and you lied to me every single second of every single day. We loved you. Martha wailed, falling to her knees. We are your parents. No, I said. You are kidnappers. You are the people who destroyed a family because you were too selfish to adopt legally. You didn't give me a better life. You gave me a stolen one. I told them I'd already called the police. I told them I'd handed over the journal and the forged documents. I walked out of that house while Martha was still screaming my name. I didn't look back. That house wasn't a home, it was a prison I'd finally escaped. The legal battle was messy. Martha and Richard were arrested, though because of their age and the time that had passed, the sentencing was complicated. But I didn't care about the jail time. I cared about the truth. I officially changed my name. I am now Stella Clara. I kept Clara as a middle name, not because I love them, but because I have to acknowledge the 34 years I spent as her. It's part of my story now. I spend a lot of time in Tacoma now. I visit the nursing home 3 times a week. My biological mother, Monica, doesn't always know who I am. Some days she calls me Valerie. Some days she just smiles and holds my hand. But there are moments, tiny, precious moments, where she looks at me, really looks at me, and whispers, Stella? You're back. I have a sister, Monica, and a nephew named Finn. They are strangers, but they are my strangers. We are learning how to be a family. It's awkward, and it's painful, and it's beautiful. I'm still an editor. I still like things to be in order. But I've learned that life doesn't always have a neat ending. Sometimes, you have to burn the whole book down and start over from the very first page. Martha continues to write me letters every week from her house, where she's under house arrest pending trial. She begs for forgiveness, claiming that despite the horrific way they acquired me, they dedicated their entire lives to giving me a safe, loving, and privileged upbringing. They say they were desperate people who made a blind mistake out of love. Am I wrong for turning them over to the authorities and refusing to ever look at them as my parents again? Or should I acknowledge the 27 years of care they gave me and find a way to forgive? Thank you for listening to my story until the very end. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that button and leaving a comment below with your verdict. Your support helps me share more of these stories.